Yo! I hope the technology is working for us. I see us on the live stream on my second screen. So we'll get the ball rolling, getting a few people in. So, hi Sander, how are you doing, my friend?
Hey Daniel, how are you? Good afternoon, actually, because we're in the same time zone.
Yeah, apparently we were supposed to say happy time zone, but to embrace my inner Stefan, happy time zone.
Well, this is a happy time zone.
Oh yeah, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, right?
It's beer o'clock.
Oh yeah, so one of the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life was I drove through California and there are weed billboards all over the place, and one of the funniest ones I've ever seen was it's 4:20 somewhere.
Yep, well, it's past 4:20 here.
It was hilarious. I found it so funny. So, for
so
those
of course,
of you,
you have a Dutchman on the show, so you start about weed. It's been, wow, 1 minute.
Dude, it's just, I live in Washington normally, so I'm partial to edibles, but we are supposed to keep it this one little bit PG-13, apparently. But let's see, maybe Christos will not yell at us that we're being inappropriate. So, for those of you that don't know Sander, Sander is an old friend of mine. We go way back like 5 years now. So we started in the same circles around MVPs, and Sander is awesome. He's an identity guy. He's literally the Dutch identity guy, for at least in my heart of hearts. That doesn't work for Microsoft. So Sander, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Sander Berkouwer. If in case you were asking, that's how you actually pronounce it.
For me, it's Berkouwer.
Close enough. And I live in the Netherlands. I do stuff with Active Directory. So it's designing, it's implementing, it's a lot of decommissioning as well. Stuff with Azure AD, ADFS, that kind of things.
So I remember before we met, I was familiar with your work by reading your stuff on dearteam.org. Can you tell us a little thing about that small little project of Dear Team or directory team? Do we have so many common friends in there that it's a piece of history of, again, in the theme of two old guys talking about stuff? Probably Dear Team is one of the fun places to start.
Yeah, so it was started in 2005 by another former MVP, a directory services MVP. That's what we were called back then. Carlos Magalhaes from South Africa. And I gradually took over, and now we're both running it. And I'm running the technical stuff. And Carlos nowadays works at Microsoft in South Africa, I think, still. Having loads of fun there. And I'm just having loads of fun with the dirteam.com and activedir.org web.
Yeah, sometimes I see you copy-pasting release notes, you lazy blogger.
Just once a month. and I just don't copy-paste them, because normally what I do is I correct them, and then I push the corrections back. You can see my name on the Azure AD release notes as well.
Yes.
Because I push my corrections back. And there's a couple of corrections that Microsoft doesn't take. So Microsoft still insists on talking about customers, and I still talk about organizations, because not every Microsoft 365 customer, or not every organization using Microsoft 365 is actually a customer of Microsoft. Most of them are customers of CSPs. So
yes. Yes. So for those that don't know, what does the CSP stand for?
Yeah, so you have cloud service providers, and as a smaller organization, you have the choice to buy your Azure AD and Microsoft 365 and all your other Microsoft Cloud licenses, your subscription licenses from partners. And of course, these partners are cherry picked, and only a specific amount of partners or a specific number of
it's an
partners can be
exclusive
CSP.
club.
Not really.
I remember I used to work for a large account reseller.
My
We used to
condolences.
sell enterprise on-premises licenses.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of interesting. I know about licensing way more than I ever wanted. So as we are not supposed to talk about cloud, we probably will start sharing our war stories about Active Directory and how it's always DNS.
Or let's talk Active Directory licenses first.
Oh yeah. So if you want to use Active Directory, you need to purchase something called Client Access License, a CAL.
And a Windows Server license.
And a Windows Server license that is associated with a specific version of Windows Server OS. So these days, the biggest blocker for some customers basically upgrading to the newest and greatest is, I don't have licensing. There used to be a way to upgrade your licenses with
software assurance.
Software assurance. It was MDOP was one of the benefits of that. I always found it pretty funny until we killed MDOP.
One of the 43 benefits, I think, something like that. Yeah.
It was basically a precursor to any kind of subscription, right? You basically subscribe to get auto upgrade. It's kind of like you can go to Apple and pay additional fee to get those on a lease, and halfway through your contract, you get a new one.
No, actually, what you would do is you would buy an iPhone for about $1,000, and then you would pay, to be exact, 25% of that $1,000 each year to be able to access those benefits, like being able to upgrade to the newest version for the time period while you're paying. If you stop paying, or if your software insurance would stop after 2 or 3 years, then, well, you better hope there's a new version, because otherwise you would just, if that's why you're in the program, if that's why you're using software insurance, then yeah, there's no new version.
Yeah, honestly, it always sounded a little bit like a scam. But one of my bosses at that LAR told me that basically that licensing is so complex because you can have only one end user license agreement or terms of use. It needs to be compliant at once with all the countries that Microsoft operates in, and it needs to be tight enough so you are not screwed in any one of those countries. And it's 192 countries these days.
Yep,
that's why it's so thick and impenetrable.
Written in legalese. Yep.
Oh yeah, of course, because it's lawyers. They have to be paid somehow.
Yep. So yeah, a couple of organizations got a bad deal out of that, of course, because talking Active Directory, of course, if you go from Windows Server 2003 to Windows Server 2003 R2, there's, and I'm quoting Eric Fleischman here, no new features in Active Directory. Of course, there were new.
That's true. Yes.
Yeah. Of course, there were other features that were closely related that would impact our Active Directory designs, but no new features in Active Directory. And then, of course, if you would pay for software assurance for Windows Server 2003, and you would actually, I don't know, start that contract in 2004, then in 2007 there was no new Windows Server. The newer Windows Server came with Windows Server 2008 in, you guessed it, 2008. So now you've paid 100% for the Windows Server for your domain controller, 75% on that same amount for your Windows Server domain controller, and you would still be running Windows Server 2003.
I know. The thing is, as soon as you introduce the first file server on what that was on the newer version, you required CALs.
Yep. But actually, the domain controller requires those CALs as well.
Yeah. Basically, the newest, all licenses get downgraded automatically, but not upgraded automatically.
Oh yeah, and the 25% was for Windows servers. The CALs was 29% a year.
And of course, to make stuff even more complicated, CALs came in 2 flavors, per user and per device. And if you try to match them and change them, it was never possible to get a handle of those.
Yep.
God damn. It's just.
But Windows Server 2008 was actually a pretty big release for Active Directory. We had the password settings objects. We had the read-only domain controllers. That was good stuff back then.
Honestly, the biggest thing was, for me personally, sysvol and DFSR.
By default, yeah. So if you installed
sysvol
it
on DFSR was possible only on 2008. DFSR was a feature of 2003 R2, but sysvol could be replicated with DFSR only on 2008.
Yeah, but here's the catch. If you upgrade your Active Directory to Windows Server 2008, you would not automatically go to DFSR for sysvol. But if you started a new domain with Windows Server 2008 or up, then it would use DFSR for sysvol.
And now, if you never done it, if you try to introduce a 2019 domain controller into your network, it straight up fails if you're using FRS, file replication services. It straight up fails. It gives you a double middle finger.
Yep. That's not really PG-13, is it, Daniel?
It's PG-13. It's not everyone.
We're going to get in so much trouble now. Okay.
It wouldn't be the first time.
But it's funny, though, because I actually ran into an issue with another Microsoft product team on that same specific, because we had a customer and nobody could figure it out back then, and they were using ASR, Azure Site Recovery. And we were talking with the product team, and we would have sysvol errors and stuff like that with test failovers, and it would just always fail on domain controllers, and everything else was fine. And I was there with another MVP, Daryl, and he said, you know what, I'm going to call someone at the product team, and we just had a discussion, and they said, well, we just set up a new domain and checked it, and it just works. I was like, you set up a new domain? I said, yeah, and we check it with backward compatibility to Windows Server 2008, 2008 R2, 2012 R2. And I thought to myself, you know what? These guys aren't testing it with 2003 and upgrading.
Of course not.
So and 2003 was still supported back then, right? And I was thinking, so what could it be? And then I thought, you know what? They might probably still be using FRS for their sysvol replication. So yeah, I stood up and I said to the customer, you know what? I just want to try something, and they still had
self-migrated them to DFSR.
Well, they still had a Windows Server 2003 domain controller in Germany, so someone drove there over the weekend to migrate it. It was already in the plans, but you know how Active Directory plans and projects go, right? So I don't have to tell you. But someone, they drove there over the weekend, fixed it, and then we upgraded it, and then everything worked flawlessly.
Yeah. That sounds like not fun.
No, good fun.
So one of my first things, so I used to do lots of workshops in my time. One of the most technically challenging ones I've ever done, but I can still do in the middle of the night, is DFSR deep dive about marshalling, demarshalling, remote differential compression. I still can do it. I don't want to. My stupid brain won't let me forget. But just no. I'm getting flop sweats. But yeah, it's always fun. I always chuckle a little bit when we have someone coming in and saying, hey, I never upgraded my functional levels. I never did that migration of DFSR because I didn't know what would break. because some of those operations are straight up one way, right? Functional level, not so much, depending on how you're going with.
Yeah, not anymore. Exactly.
Yeah, from 2003 and 2008, that's the only one that's one way. But yeah, I've never seen. Oh, maybe I will ask you. I personally have never seen a use case where changing a functional level would break anything.
No, I haven't seen it either. But everybody's scared about it.
Yeah.
And the only thing, and this is fun because this is how Active Directory. I think this is the main reason why Active Directory projects are over budget and over time. Is if you want to roll back a functional upgrade, you just have to restore all your domain controllers.
You have to do entire forest recovery. Yeah.
You have to do an entire forest recovery. So one of the questions that I ask when an organization asks me, can we roll it back, is, sure. Do you create backups? Yes, we create backups. Okay. Have you tested restoring your domain controllers in the last year or something like that?
Yeah, 6 months is the common use.
But in the last year, I tend to give my customers some slack. I'm sorry, but
you're too kind.
But the answer is almost no. So then so that's something that we need to do first, and then you get to the situation where you can actually reliably restore single domain controllers. But that's not a forest recovery yet.
No.
So then you have to test, do the restore test for your forest recovery. Yep, it's a big old mess. So that's
the thing is, so
3 months. Most
no. So we have. So I know we shouldn't be talking, but we have friends like Sean Doobie, right?
Absolutely, at Semperis, yep.
At Semperis. Semperis has a solution that basically does all that entire kerfuffle for you. It's an additional thing. You can. It's always like that. You can pay someone to do it for you, right? To execute it. So you can pay to Semperis, you can pay to Veeam, you can pay to Microsoft Consulting Service, you can pay to Sander here. He will do it for you, charging a good rate. Or you can figure it out on your own, but you will basically have to hire 3 people, and it will be about €1 million a year to maintain those people in your company. Realistically, to have good system, 3 excellent principal level system engineers, it's about €1 million a year, including insurance, benefits, and everything.
Yep.
So yeah, it's always fun. I used to do those recovery procedures and recovery execution services. It's always a challenge to write them in such a way that semi-educated monkey can execute them. Right?
Yeah,
it should be written. You should give the piece of paper and passwords to any person amongst all of your IT staff, and they should be able to execute it.
But isn't that something that we? And this is something that I feel very strongly about. Isn't this something that we need for everything that is Active Directory related? All the common tasks.
Honestly, common tasks should be automated. Common tasks should be RPA'd by ticketing system, so you have operational excellence.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When you have a task that is a response of a specific ticket you have in your ticketing system, you should have an automation that if the ticket gets approved, the execution happens. So your admins do not swivel chair, right? They go into one screen, see the ticket, go to the other screen, execute the ticket. This one is the most error-prone thing that can ever happen. I'm a fan of automation. I'm a lazy admin. My Instagram handle is literally minimum administrative effort.
But not everything in Active Directory can be automated.
Of course not. The thing is, our good friend George, right? He has written a blog about rotating KRBTGT password.
Yes.
Automating that one is a big no-no.
No, I agree. Yeah, but you still have to do it every month.
Yeah. Every month, or depending. That honestly, my KRBTGTs and my service tickets haven't been rotated for years now, and because I don't care about golden tickets.
Yeah, we have a couple of security firms that are doing engagements with customers, and every time high-profile organization is asked to rotate their crypt-GGT secrets, one way or another, they always end up with me. I don't know why. And it's good
funny.
fun. Yeah, it's good fun.
The thing is, you do it, and so the funny thing is the aforementioned upgrading functional level does it as well, right? So if you want to see
just the upgrade to or beyond the domain function level for Windows Server 2008, does it?
Yeah. Yes. There is a technical reason because of AES keys. They need to be generated so TGTs can be encrypted with that key. That's the only reason. But honestly, that's sometimes one of the best ways to figure out when was the functional level changed. Without looking at high watermarks and replication metadata on the naming context.
Yeah, or looking at the schema. Yep.
Yeah, it's just so. One of the most arcane things is, for me, used to be how Active Directory replication works. Do you know how to find that TechNet article today?
Is it
because
still
that
there?
TechNet article exists.
Are you sure it's still there? Because the entire script center went away last month, for instance.
So let me tell you, the thing is, let me tell you what we did in Microsoft with legacy documentation. So for a while, it was basically rolled back, zipped into one gigantic PDF, and put in a download center. People cried their heads off, deservedly. So now you can, all the old documentation is still there on docs.microsoft.com, but B, it's on non-indexed by Google or any search engine. It has robots.txt to prevent its indexing. You have to go to the previous versions documentation page, and you search in a built-in search bar in there. And everything is there. There is NT 4.0, 2000, 2003, all of those excellent technical docs that are still applicable today because the ideas haven't changed. They are still there, but they are ungoogleable.
So when are we seeing Bing integration for that then? Because I don't use Google anyway, but
I'm from Eastern Europe. I use DuckDuckGo for my searches.
Yep.
No, the thing is that that search engine underneath that docs page is Bing search, is that Bing enterprise search. But the thing is, because Microsoft is historically bad at search engine optimization, having docs that have been linked for 2 decades basically broke all of our new docs SEO. So that's why all of those old docs basically dropped off search engines. So the new stuff that wasn't pushed onto the second page of your search results. It's like, it's an old proverb, right? Best place to hide something, second page of Google search results.
Yeah.
So it's there, but you have to go.
Yeah. And of course, the fun thing is searching something and then finding your own blog post for about 6-7 years ago. Yeah.
It's fun. So yeah, that old documentation, and Bolt in the chat says that if it's ungoogleable, it doesn't exist. It's all about how determined you are. If you're determined enough to crawl arcane pages, I still see my old Usenet posts for alt.quake.
Oh, PG-13 here, Daniel.
Alt.quake was about video games, so I play video games like nobody's business. I'm looking forward to playing more Civilization after we're done with this one.
All right.
Okay, we have Mr. Bukeros that rated us with 5 viewers. Welcome, everybody. We're talking about old Active Directory stuff, and we're sharing some war stories. So we were on the topic of replication. So what was the most fun thing you have ever seen that someone broke replication ever?
Did I ever tell you about the schema update that someone did because he wanted the drinks attribute for a demo, and then he had a power issue, and then it failed?
I have a schema change as well, so you go ahead first.
It was just funny because he was doing a schema update, and then the power we had a power loss, so everything was just down and didn't come up again in terms of Active Directory.
Oh,
so
wow.
it's not a, it's not a story that really holds value. But I'm curious to your value.
So I had a customer in my consulting days, because for your information, y'all, I used to be a Microsoft MVP. They had me for a year and a half. And then Microsoft hired me because they said I made a bad press for them being a community member. But in my consulting days, I used to do SCCM, System Center Configuration Manager. And as part of the deployment for SCCM, for your agents to discover your SCCM servers, there used to be a schema extension, something akin to the SCP you do today for hybrid join, something very similar. That SCCM had its own schema attributes in the definition. It was by like 11 attributes. I went to a customer. They had an admin that hated SCCM, was a big fan of Nagios and couple of Quest tools. So to make it impossible for SCCM to be ever installed, he extended the schema with the proper names but faulty attributes syntax.
Wow.
And it was set in stone a year and a half prior to me coming on site. So SCCM was impossible to deploy in that forest.
But you were determined, right?
Oh, I did the DNS thing, right? You could fall back to DNS, but it was just bad. It was deploying gazillion registry keys. It was just bad. I learned a lot during that deployment.
It's usually when things go wrong that you actually learn. You can learn things from books like this, but
you're old. You can learn from books.
Oh, I have a.
You write books. You literally have one of your own on your desk. Yes, Shelmet.
I feel seen.
Hopefully in the right way.
Yeah, it's funny because most people tend to Google their faults and then tend to learn, and the percentage of organic visits to their team is something that always that was also always surprising to me. So I set out to find a way to actually help AD admins to do their job more more straightforward.
Yeah, it's just
actually.
Yeah. It's always about helping people figure out something, right? Because what you learn that people don't read documentation or books proactively, right? People very rarely do.
So what I did is I wrote this little book, and it has 150 recipes in them to do all the mundane stuff that, as an AD admin, you would normally do.
Yep.
And for each of the recipes, and this, I thought that was the fun part. For each of the recipes, there's actually a couple of lines that I could use to explain. And then I took the liberty to add another couple of lines. This is what people in the feedback give back is the most valuable from real world scenarios. So one of the recipes, for instance, is to add a user.
Copy user object. Have a template and copy the user objects.
It's also in there. But add a user. And add a user is different for each organization that I've seen in the last 20 years. So one of the lines that I wrote is, you know what, you should ask another admin what the procedure is for creating an account. If there's differences between accounts for users, service accounts, and stuff like that.
Yep.
Because once you know for your organization, you can actually do stuff. And I just saw a tweet from my friend Yui, and I know that Yui made a little assumption a while ago, saying that all your service accounts start with SA_, right? Well, Most organizations probably do, but there are some that don't.
Yep.
Most of them have SA_SVC
For mine, it
_.
always starts with GMSA_ because this is the only kind of service account I allow.
Yeah. And you always run into problems with ADFS if you want to type your GMSA_ADFS, and then the GUI gives back its GMSA. The A is underlined DFS. Now the underscore is actually placed under the A because it's interpreted that way. I think you could do you might be able to do some injection there. Well, let me. I'll let Yui figure it out.
So our good friend Tomasz Onyszko, he used to be a writer at Dear Team, right?
Yes.
He has a Polish language podcast about, and he has a point that processes and procedures are a memory of a company.
Yep.
That if you have a process and procedure for creators that has been ingrained for the past 2 decades, even though the people have changed, it leaves you with a specific imprint about the company culture, how organized is the company, how flexible, and so on and so forth. And then a vendor like Microsoft comes in and says, let's do cloud SaaS provisioning. And then you say, but I have this thing. Can you do exactly the way I want it to do? If not, please walk out and there's the door.
Yeah, that's the difference between a good consultant and a lazy consultant.
Yeah. So one of the most tractionful posts I ever did on LinkedIn is that I said that every time a consultant says it depends, an angel loses its wings.
Yeah, a puppy dies. Yep.
We kill a kitten. But at the end of the day, every single consultant went and shared it disagreeing with me adamantly, because that's literally their livelihood. I, as an engineer at heart, I'm solution based, right? We like, hey, this is the way you do it. There are 3 other ways. In my experience, this is the best. I know it's an absolute, but let's start from some kind of a position instead of me listening to you babble for 10 hours. I can charge you for those 10 hours, sure. But again, that's just me. And people were so freaking livid.
Yep. Yeah, there's search for that, right? Consultancy fee, 125 euros. If I have to listen to
cheap.
you, it's
that's
150.
Cheap.
Hey, it's the market, right? Currently.
Yes.
Everybody needs to make a living.
Good MIM consultant can clock 250 euro an hour. Good MIM consultant.
I'm so glad I'm not a good MIM consultant. Anyway.
Yeah. So the replication one, that was the most fun one, the schema one. Also, I heard about a customer that got lingering objects in their schema partition. I have no idea how.
Interesting. Yeah.
I have no idea how one would get lingering objects in schema. But when I was preparing for Active Directory MCM, Microsoft Certified Master,
yeah, the one that doesn't exist anymore.
No, I'm trying to track down all the old materials, training materials for it, because in my immediate team I have 5 MCMs.
I think I have a link somewhere. I know. What's his first name? Mark Paris has. He put up a link a couple of years ago with all the stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking for the internal library with the VMs and everything.
Okay, I don't have.
Again, a couple of I have 5 immediate teammates with MCM, and one of them basically was creating the courseware.
Okay.
So it's just I think how upset you are with this Microsoft very centric cloud first, always cloud, Active Directory is an afterthought. Is it make you a little bit mad, or are you glad that you will be employed forever and you will have something to do because it's not going away anytime soon? Or is it something a little bit in between?
No, it's a little bit in between. I feel a lot of pity for Active Directory, actually.
Really?
Yeah, if you look at working from home, so even from an identity point of view, right?
Hmm.
We've been going after um, work any place, any device, anytime.
Yep.
And about a year ago, we switched to any device, any place, all the time.
All the time. Oh, if you have bad
That's
work ethics and you work all the time, sure.
Yeah, but that was what we saw,
Yep.
and I see domain controllers get really lonely these days. They only talk, and
Aww.
the same with zero trust, right? Domain controllers only communicate to their closest buddies now, to their radio servers. And if you're lucky, you don't have those. To the Azure AD Connect server, to Azure AD app proxies, to ADFS servers, and not a lot more. So yeah, I think domain controllers are getting really really lonely. And of course they have a bad reputation these days. And of course everybody would say, yeah, because Active Directory domain controllers get popped all the time, but it's not even that. Active Directory is like Active Directory domain services on-prem is like the little retarded nephew of Azure Active Directory. The always on, always happening, always up to date Active Directory.
No, at this point I sorely disagree. It's that person that keeps everything running, but you don't notice them until the shit hits the proverbial fan.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as it's fine, they are in there always, right? 24/7, reliable, scalable. Honestly, I can today design Active Directory that will be more performant than the biggest Azure AD tenant on the planet today that has 7 million users. If you go north of 7 million, Azure can be brought a little bit to its knees. I've seen Active Directory forests for 30 million, 40 million users, and they just work fine.
Mm-hmm. Because they're managed by gurus. Even
no, they have been designed 20 years ago and they haven't been touched since.
I hope they've been upgraded.
One of my favorite projects I've ever been on was I was working with one of the drilling companies. It was the first and only time ever. So one of the 2 times ever. One was the rumor, one I've seen in real life, when I've seen SMTP replication links.
Wow.
Every drilling platform, its own domain.
Hold on. Our viewers might not know that. Our viewers might not have NT4 in their networks. Why would you use SMTP links for replication? Because you have unreliable networks, right?
The thing is, SMTP can be used only for read-only partition replication, so only for global catalog. And you have unreliable links because basically SAT-link situation. Basically, imagine you have a drilling platform. You want to allow drilling operator to sign into their PCs with a central account. So you bring up a domain in a forest on that drilling platform, and when the satellite flies over, it downloads and sends a global catalog and then moves on. I think one of the Dutch companies that is in the drilling business has that setup.
They might have.
From what I've heard, US Army does the same for submarines.
Yeah, probably. Yep.
For submarines, but it was astounding. I've never seen it happen, but it was my jaw dropped when I saw that.
And it does work.
It works swimmingly. It works as designed. So talking about being lonely on the internet, I've seen recently a couple of people floating an idea that you can basically use this thing called KDC proxy to allow cached credentials problems to be solved. I tested it. It works. It's fully unsupported. I asked around because it doesn't have any DDoS prevention or anything like that. But because you're basically exposing your domain controller to the internet. But KDC proxy works like a charm. You don't have to have a VPN and line of sight to a domain controller to update cached credentials, validate accounts on domain joint machines. No hybrid join shenanigans, no nothing. It just works.
And that's where we see companies heading now, because
Yep.
and this must be something that you see as well. It's especially true for the organizations with about 100 seats to about 400 seats. Is there are loads of organizations with .local domain names. These Active Directory domains were designed and implemented, and there was never even an inkling, never a thought that Active Directory would ever be connected to internet services or outside services, or do anything with trusts, for instance.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
Now we're seeing all kinds of organizations heading towards having to rename their Active Directory, or having to...
The rename is not really necessary. The thing is, the rename is not really necessary. Just add a suffix, rename your users, and just live with the name resolution of your DC and DC locator being a little bit iffy over VPN. That's about it.
Yeah, but there's more to it, because most of the times what we're also seeing with mergers and acquisitions and stuff like that is that they want to get rid of the domain name as well. So it's all these problems that Active Directory is facing.
Yeah, it's always about DNS, right? Your users type in intranet.company.local in their browser. How the hell do you dig yourself out of that hole?
Well, it's either DNS or what did Laura say? It's either DNS, a typo, or PKI, right? What was the last Azure AD outage about?
It was DNS.
What was the last Azure AD outage about? Oh yeah, PKI. Yeah, PKI. There was a certificate renewal that was...
Oh, you don't want...
canceled.
I'm not allowed to tell you this story, how this happened. I'm not allowed to share that story. But yeah, the public peer was accurate. It was because of government, US government.
Yep.
But yeah, I remember that replication is fun. It's just basically the lightest database on the planet. I literally did masters on object databases. It was so much fun.
I think it's the lightest multi-master database.
Multi-master, yes, that's the crucial part. Multi-master database. So as a database primary guy in my past, every time I see a Hadoop cluster with a JSON that is one table, one column, and then you hope for the best without data normalization, I just say, or for crying out loud, just do a relational database. Just do it. It's not that hard.
Yeah, just be done with it. Yep.
Yeah, just do a relational database. SQL isn't scary. Yeah, we have a plan. Maybe we will ask Mr. Debug Privilege, to get into and do us show us KQL a little bit on one of those in the future.
Oh yeah, ask Huey. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, Huey. Yeah, about KQL. I love his tweets about KQL. So yeah, Huey.
That's good fun. He's not pulling on-premises logs to log analytics.
I know, from the
data warehouses, and then running through them with KQL. Yeah, good fun.
Yeah, it's always fun. The backup, we covered backup and recovery. We covered DNS. So I don't know if you know that, but Microsoft has made a decision that there will be no more functional levels.
So, well, I knew that, and it was a goal for the last decade, I think.
Yep.
To skip them, but we were discussing raising the domain function level for Windows Server 2008, right? And resetting the current TGT password. One of the things with the current TGT password is that there's also a fallback, because of course current TGT password is used to encrypt all the Kerberos tokens. You can't just switch the password, because everybody still has tokens that have a lifetime of, I don't know, an hour.
8 hours.
Well, it's actually more like 7 days that you can use them, and it's 1 day for services. But you can't just invalidate Kerberos tokens like that. Everything would just break. You had to restart everything, and
Yeah.
that's not something that you want. So there's a fallback as well. And as long as you had Kerberos tokens or tickets that were encrypted with the old password, it would still accept those as valid tickets. So in a
Yes.
compromised situation, you would actually want to change that password twice with at least 7 days between them. So I've created the process, and it's running with a lot of organizations already that we do stuff every month. I kick replication in the face basically through PowerShell, and then we change it.
But
So
isn't
that-
KRBTGT rotation a sensitive operation, and it should go as an urgent replication signal? You don't even have to kick the replication in the face, or do you disable it for the time being and see what happens?
No, I kick it in the face just to be sure that everything is replicating.
Okay.
So I kick it in the face, and then I see what happens. And if there's a domain controller that says I'm not replicating,
oh yeah, up-to-dateness
the
vector.
The script actually will tell you, you know what, you have domain controllers that are not replicating. And
Yeah.
that's because I kicked it in the face, and every domain controller is paying attention now.
Yeah, rep admin repl some, or
No,
and then you take it from there. Show you to debug.
Let me see what it is. Let me.
It's just, I love rep admin. I love those things. So I remember when I was trying to learn the high watermarks thingy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And up-to-dateness vector. How do we
Mm-hmm.
prevent replication loops and everything? It took me 3 days of reading one 3-page article over and over again.
Yeah, and now we explain it on sessions at VMworld in 3 minutes.
Don't even get me started. There are still things people don't. Okay, I will sound like an old guy yelling at clouds.
Will someone please pay attention that I've got Daniel to not say anything for about 8 seconds?
You got me perplexed. It's just I'm stopping my varia. But yeah, the replication of Active Directory within its core, it's one of the most brilliant distributed designs I've ever seen. It's not even close. Cosmos DB, not even close. The way we do LDAP replication behind Azure AD, not even close. But yeah, people trying to tell me that there is something better today with loose replication consistency, prove me that there is something else.
But you have to admit, because we've touched on Windows Server 2003, Windows Server 2008 Active Directory. You have to admit that if replication was as brilliant as you now say it is, that we didn't have to do anything in Windows Server 2012 to have these safeguards, the virtualization safeguards for Active Directory, right?
It's the USN rollback, yes.
There was a flaw in Active Directory, because
yes,
the one assumption that they made was that time was linear. And we've already seen
the time is only moving forward. That was the assumption, that the time is a thing that goes from past through present to the future. And the time is basically, again, linear. Yes, you're right. That was the assumption. And who would have thought that time isn't linear in IT?
But we saw that with the first domain controllers already, when people started snapshotting them.
No. Do you know the first ever Microsoft support case for USN rollback?
Nope.
I dug it out when I joined Microsoft in 2012. When I was learning that, I dug into Microsoft support history. First USN rollback is in 1999.
Okay.
Someone mirrored a RAID 1 under a domain controller, and they pulled out a drive as a backup. Something went wrong, and they switched the drives.
Wow.
1999. Wow. In the pre-release version of NT 451.
Yeah, NT5 beta. Yep.
Yeah, NT5 beta. Yep.
But interestingly, because I had a similar issue, because what we had at the customer had 3 servers, and they got a 4th server somewhere, or they got it by accident and told nobody, but they had 4 servers, and they said, you know what, that will be our extra server. Is if anything is wrong with one of the other servers, we just pull out the disks and put it in the 4th server and start it up. And of course, two of the 3 servers were domain controllers. The first server dies. It was a domain controller that I think the power supply failed or something like that. They pulled out the disks.
It's always something like that, yeah.
Something like that. Something physical, something mundane in IT. Yep. So they take out the disks, they put it in the 4th server, and they start it up. Never, ever having checked the BIOS date and time.
Yeah.
Everything back to the 1700s.
Yep. If it was PDC, it spread the time, yeah. The thing is, going back to the past is not that big of a deal. Always go back and everything will be fine. But slinging back forward, if you had any change with the past timestamp, then the problems occurred. And then you was enroll back. The thing is, what you're talking about with the VM generation ID on 2012, it technically didn't change the way replication works at all. The NTDS replication was working the same. What it did, it changed the behavior of the service itself. When it saw something went wrong, it went into recovery mode. Basically, it behaves as if it recovered from a backup.
Yeah,
that's the only behavior. But the biggest change in the replication was from, if I remember correctly, from 2000 to 2003 with link value replication, LVR.
Yep.
That was the biggest gain when you had 1700. When you had 700 groups and you changed one member, you had to replicate all 700 values in 2000. In 2003, not so much.
Yeah, you just send over one group member change. Yeah. And you're right.
Unless your group wasn't LVR enabled. I still see groups that are not LVR enabled and they clog AD Connect.
Yep. But it's funny how much you can do to Active Directory and it still keeps running.
Yes.
Sometimes I'm amazed at how you know Active Directory sites and stuff like that. You can mess that up so hard and not even only sometimes few hindered because changes flow through a replication schema or a replication schedule that only runs once a day, for instance. And people say, I've changed my password when I was at the office yesterday. Now I'm here in the other office. It's not here yet. That kind of stuff. But it is really hard to break. And you're right. The virtualization safeguards weren't a feature that were in replication. It was a check that was added before each Active Directory write to the database. Yeah.
So I have a question for you because I've never seen that one. Because I remember when they were teaching me about 2012, what's new and great. One was this thing we're talking about. The other one was dynamic access control, claims-based thingy.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen anyone use dynamic access control ever?
Nope. No, and I think what's wonderful is that. But I think I need to explain that a little bit. So dynamic access control is claims in Kerberos tickets.
Because technically we can stuff whatever we want inside of a Kerberos ticket because PAC, Privilege Attribute Certificate, doesn't specify you only are allowed to use group memberships in there. You can do whatever you want in there.
What's the functions you ever put in there then?
So the thing is, one of my colleagues, Steve Seifes, I highly recommend Steve Seifes' blog about Kerberos and his musing about Kerberos. We are working on something really fun together, me and Steve. The thing is, you can stuff whatever you want. You can put your notepad in a Kerberos ticket if you want, if you call GSS API right. Because it's always a copy of a TGT. If a TGT is fine, TGS will always be a copy of a TGT.
I think that opens a can of worms in terms of injections, right? Yep.
Yes,
cool.
Especially with Azure AD Kerberos.
So dynamic access control just injects
inject
claims.
key value pairs based on specific criteria.
Yeah, so you add claims basically. And by the time that Microsoft added the dynamic access control feature, most large organizations were already moving their file servers to SharePoint.
Yeah, that's fair.
And one of the things that we see in SharePoint is that SharePoint was one of the key players, I think, in terms of adopting ADFS in the early years. So
yes.
2005,
the thing is, SharePoint is literally has MEM and ADFS claims inside of it. The MEM, there is a small version of MEM to synchronize user profiles inside of SharePoint, and there is a claims-based transitioning engine. That's why when you get into SharePoint with an NTLM, the claims engine will create you a SharePoint token. You get with a SAML claim, it will create another token, and you will technically not be the same user inside of the claims database.
Yep. So what we're seeing is that there were a couple of organizations that were combating token bloat, of course, because your Kerberos token size is limited in a couple of places. We also saw some organizations that went beyond the 1,015 group memberships for an account.
This is the bigger problem. The 115 is these days bigger problem than the thingy.
These days, because you can go all the way to 12 KB. I think in IIS is one of the harder limits these days.
You can change the IIS limit with one register. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And with pack compression being on by default and being able to be serviced.
Also a Windows Server 2012 feature. Yep.
Yes.
Yep, absolutely. So we're seeing some organizations combat that. But if you go beyond 1,015 group memberships, you're already a big company. If you hit that 1,015 group membership,
or you are
as an organization, or for an organization with about 200 or 300 people, you're doing something wrong.
Yes, I've seen this one in almost every educational customer I work with, because they represent classroom and classes students take as group memberships, because they add them to a team or something like that. And I've seen it in almost every educational organization. That's why they convert them into distribution groups instead of being security groups.
Yep. But did you also see them adopt dynamic access control?
Nope. They don't want to use file shares.
Yeah, they all went SharePoint, and now these days they're all going Teams. Yep.
Or Google Apps or Google Docs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think dynamic access control, and I presented a couple of times about that. I think it's a cool feature, but it's
a cool idea, right?
Yeah.
It's a cool idea. You assert something, and then it's up to the file share to let you in to perform authorization that doesn't involve parsing gazillion SIDs.
Yep.
It's a cool idea. I'm looking for that unicorn. That's someone that is using it. Sam Devashayam, Mr. ADFS, says there are a couple of big customers that are using it.
Okay.
Probably some kind of US Army or something like that. But we will see. The thing is, we need to support it. It's just cooked, works. Honestly, the thing that came out of the claims support, the best thing is support for compound ID and armoring.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, you enable the same feature for dynamic access control as you would for Kerberos Armoring. And Kerberos Armoring is a really big feature in terms of security. Yeah.
Yes. It's way harder to do pass the ticket and stuff like that when you have armoring enabled. If someone port mirrors your Ethernet switch, they get your armored Kerberos ticket. They cannot do anything with it.
Yeah, and if you don't have it, then your initial handshake is basically out in the open.
And it's because it's protected by your computer account. Yeah. I love it. So there are things. So the highest functional level we have these days is 2016, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, 2019 and 2022 do not have functional levels anymore. And it turns out in Active Directory, there is no new features. Nothing is added in Server 2022. I looked.
Yep. There's a couple of things that you really want.
OS platform, the TLS stuff, the hashing, the SHA-1 stuff, and stuff like that. It's basically platform level stuff.
Yep. Yeah, I saw the TLS 1.3 as well. That's
Yeah.
that's a big deal for a lot of government organizations. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. So do you know how did engineers that figured out the thing that do you know levels anymore? Do you know how it works? That
Well,
the DC locator got changed to find a specific version of a domain controller.
Yeah, you have the slash DS9 and
DS.
yeah.
DS9, DS10, and pretty soon DS11, DS12.
Oh wait, did I miss some episodes of Star Trek now? I only know about DS9.
I'm a Trekkie, dude. Don't tempt me. So yeah, thanks to that, because we are Windows client today, when it does its finding of a domain controller, it can specifically ask to find a specific version of an OS. That's how Hello for Business works.
Yeah, you can do that with NL test as well. NL test slash DS get DC and then
for the longest time the DS flags weren't documented for NL test.
Yeah, good fun.
So that's how it works. Basically, if I want to find 2016, I just feed it DS9. If I want to find 2019, I feed it DS10. And 11 will be when 22 comes out. That's why you don't need basically get a drop of your blood and sign that deal with the devil of promising Microsoft you will not have all domain controllers older than X. Right?
But this is also why it's also how Windows Hello for Business indeed detects those new domain controllers. Yep. And actually, it's fun because we had this discussion a while ago while we were troubleshooting a Windows Hello for Business case. And you said, you know what, just on your Azure AD joint device, just type in that NL test slash DS get DC. And if you get something back, then type slash DS9 to see if it's a Windows Server 2016 domain controller or not. And it was just a plain old Azure AD joint device, and it knew about my domain controllers because Azure AD Connect feeded that to Azure AD.
Yeah, absolutely. That's honestly the design is brilliant. And again, it's DNS, right? That entire thing that just DNS queries your domain controllers and LDAP pings them. Couple of things for our listeners that they need to be made aware. DC locator times out after about 16 LDAP pings. So if one of the first 16 domain controllers your work session tries to talk to is not the one you want, it will fail. It takes about 5 seconds to do 16 of those. Second, if you don't have a domain controller in your site that meets the criteria, the next closest site doesn't work for DC locator. It works only for Sysvol and GPO.
Nice tidbit.
There is no such thing as next closest site in DC locator. It used to be solely for GPOs and downloading group policy objects by DFS, distributed file system namespaces. But LDAP ping and DC locator, if there is no specific version of the OS in your site, it will just LDAP query the generic ones that are non-site specific.
Yeah, and that makes I think that makes Active Directory still fun because there's so much more little tidbits. There's so much more little things that work or don't work or whatever. Because I've been looking at the release notes for the April 22 update for Windows Server 2019, the preview update, and there's an update for ADFS that actually tells us the enable PDC flag for the smart account lockout doesn't work as expected.
Yep.
So somebody has figured that out, and I don't even want to know how they did that.
I know who figured that one out. People are brilliant, honestly brilliant. Yeah, it's always stuff like that. For instance, one of my first weeks in Microsoft, one of my colleagues slapped me in the face with the behavior of admin SD holder.
Hold on a minute.
I didn't know anything about admin SD holder when I joined Microsoft.
It's actually allowed to slap you in the face? Oh,
always.
Okay. Now I know. Now I know.
Yeah.
Now I know.
As long as I remember my mother's maiden name, do it. Right? But yeah, it was admin SD holder. Those arcane small things, right? Protected users, protected groups. And I sometimes feel sorry for us that when we do those cloudy things, we lose an opportunity to go that in depth.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We cannot nerd out that much, because how much nerding out can you have by launching an Azure portal? You can press F12, grab an access token, and do some token replay if you want. I do it for my automation of APIs because I'm too lazy to acquire token. So I log into an Azure portal, press F12, copy the token, and paste it into Postman.
Well, Azure AD Connect is also a lot of fun because you can do all the stages, all the sync profiles manually, and then just use SQL Management Studio, for instance, to look in the database and actually see what happens. And of course, Dirk Jan did that and said, so hey, there's passwords in here. That's cool. So yeah, there's still loads of fun to be had.
These are service account passwords protected with DP API. Let's not go crazy like that.
Did you actually say protected by DP API? There's no such thing.
Protected.
Yeah, surrounded by DP API.
Yeah, DP API is just another layer to make stuff harder to pop. Yes, agreed. Yeah. Let's agree there.
Yeah,
facetious jerk.
And encoded. Yeah, all the words that program managers feel really nice about, but if you ask them questions, they think, perhaps I should have used real encryption. Yep.
You cannot swing a dead cat in Redmond without hitting a program manager. So.
Yeah. See password values. Oh yeah, that was a good idea. Passwords encoded in group policy. Yeah, for everyone to read.
Yeah, I used to write password filter DLLs in my time. It was fun, dumping them into a TXT file onto Sysvol.
I actually I troubleshooted an incident with LSASS just crashing all of a sudden on all domain controllers, and it was a password filter DLL.
Yeah, and probably some kind of funky character was in there that made it crash. That wasn't escaped.
No, it was abandonware. Actually, it was. I had to create another Active Directory site, add 2 domain controllers just for the legacy stuff, and I just isolated it. And I said, "Good luck."
Yeah.
And all the other domain controllers, they were running perfect back then, and all the old domain controllers, the ones that were isolated, would still crash once in a while. But yeah. And
it's like having a PCNS agent that hasn't been updated for 10 years.
Exactly. And LSASS crashes and fixes for LSASS. This is fun, right? In the past 10, is it 10? Yeah. In the past year, in cumulative updates for Windows Server 2019 and Windows Server 2016, 10 of the 12 cumulative updates had fixes for LSASS crashes.
For LSASS, nice.
It's
because it's a blue screen. When LSASS crashes, it's a blue screen.
Well, it's actually a restart on a domain controller after a minute.
It's a memory dump. Yeah.
LSASS crashes, memory dump, reboot. Yep. Good fun if you're into.
I miss analyzing memory dumps. Yeah, I miss analyzing memory dumps sometimes.
Okay, next
you just
time
attach a debugger to a process and do strings.
Next time I have one, I'll call you. No worries.
Okay. I think we are at a time, my friend. It's fun reminiscing about that old stuff. I didn't even tell my story when I did cross-site scripting with silver tickets and dropping syslog databases.
Next time.
But you can do it. Next time. Thank you, Mr. Berkouwer. You can, for those watching here or on demand later on, Sander is on Twitter. Follow him. If you're Dutch speaking, he has an amazing podcast with one of our friends, Mr. Raymond Cornelius.
Yep,
very fun. If I understand Dutch, I would be listening to it. But I highly recommend it. dearteam.org, right?
.com.
dearteam.com, Sander Berkouwer on Twitter, buy his book on Amazon if you ever want to do Active Directory. We don't have a reference link because we want Sander to get all the money.
I
appreciate you coming in and having short hangout with me.
Yeah, give my best to all the other guys, and let's
Will
talk
do.
soon.
Yeah. Flying Dutchman, Mr. Sander Berkouwer. Thanks, y'all. I don't know how to rate anyone, so I have no idea how to do it in the restream. So I think we will just rudely finish with an outro, and thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.